Hello and welcome to another lighting diagram lesson. My name is Trenton Hoshiko, and today we're talking about The Queen in Hamlet by Edwin Austen Abbey from 1895. Before I get started, if you want to follow along with your own image, you can get my free template for Draw.io that has all these filmmaker tools up here already created so that you can just get started diagramming. It's available completely free on my Patreon. You don't have to even sign up or join or anything at all. The link to that is down in the video's description. If you do go over there and grab it, please let me know. I would love to hear that it's helping people out. I just want to put that out there for free so that people can use it as a communication tool with their teams and a way to practice and think about lighting in a way that helps them grow their skill set. While you're on my Patreon, if you want to join, I have free and paid tiers that start at just $2. And those paid tiers do help support these lighting diagram lessons as well as my general cinematography videos. Thank you so much to everybody who's gone over there and joined already. I really appreciate your support. I do have some starting guide videos that teach you how to import the template and import images into Draw.io. Draw.io itself is a free and open source diagramming software available at diagrams.net. So let's take a look at this image over here. I saw this the other day and I just thought this was really gorgeous, specifically the streaks of light coming through that's made by the brush strokes. And I think that's a really good example of how painting differs from something like photography and other photographic mediums, in that you're using the brush strokes to actually capture the essence of the light itself. And the texture that the brushstroke provides changes how the light looks. And so as a reference image, we're looking to replicate that feeling, even though we can't manage that in nearly the same way because of the difference in medium. And that's just one reason why I love art, is because there's so many different individual choices, literally millions of individual choices that the artist makes. And, if it's a filmmaking project, usually a team of artists make together to make the actual final image. And I just think that's so cool and so human. And so that's one thing that I really want to see if we can capture, the idea that we have these streaks of light. For me, I'm going to say, let's do that using some fog and some shafts of light, and we'll see if we can get almost like a God ray look coming through here. Because I think in many ways, these streaks look like God rays. And I love the kind of sharper fidelity of these shadows, but notice how they're not really all that dense. Even on the dark side here, this is not very dense of a shadow. It's actually only slightly darker than the light side and the kind of middle area of her outfit. So we're going to try to make sure we have enough fill light to even everything out while still getting these shafts of light through something harder to create these kinds of small shadows that create hard outlines. So when looking at the image, the actual light, I suspect, comes from a window. That's just to her left, our camera right. And I think this because you can see back here, there's a streak of light, and you see here, there's a streak of light, and it kind of, goes the width of her chair. And so I think that basically we're getting the throne area illuminated by the light from a single window. And so once again, that shadow area down here is not incredibly dark. We do have lots of fill light and ambient light in this space to make it so that this is not an incredibly contrasty image in the main subject area. Now, where that does differ is in the background. The background is almost completely blacked out, so we don't have to care about that as much. We can push that into the darkness and have that be just fine, as long as we're getting the foreground area to be lit with not a huge amount of contrast between where the window's light's falling on the ground and the non-lit areas, while also still getting those streaks of light. You can see that it's hitting her face some, so I think her head is turned a little bit, opening her right side towards the camera. And so you can see how there is a little bit of light on her nose and the left side of her face there. So I just want to make sure that we're getting that position where she can turn her head and catch that light on her nose area. While the light, I think, is relatively hard in terms of how the small shadows do work and how we get those really defined edges, and especially on the floor here, I don't think that we're using any like diffusion on the lamp. Fog that we're going to use in the scene is going to diffuse that light a little bit and help spread it out, so we get this more of a light volume in the room. I'm going to start by just kind of building out a basic throne room here. And we don't need anything too crazy. Even how light the shadow is, we could be having a white wall on the left side here. I don't think from how this looks that we have any window sources or primary sources on the left side, you know, at least for motivation wise. So I'm going to just leave that as a wall, but it could be a white wall. We could be using some bounce to push that back in. We'll get to that in just a minute. And I'm going to place this window so that it's ever so slightly forward of her. The light angles back ever so slightly. I mean, like, it's just a couple degrees difference of that angle, you know, as it goes left to right here. So I'm going to put the window just slightly forward of her, and have the light come in at a very slight angle. And so we end up with a shape kind of like this. Oh, I guess we should probably put her on her throne. There we go. Perfect. And then let's place our camera. This is a little bit further back. I would say you could have some compression in the space. I would say this is bordering on telephoto, but not quite actually telephoto. Something like this. And so this is our basic layout. If you had a space where you're shooting where sunlight could come in, you could technically shoot this with sunlight. I think that you lose your, you know, most of your control there with that. I should also note that I think that this window is relatively high up. It's coming down. You can see, you know, with those light type streaks, it is coming downwards, and we do see the shadow area going from right to left. So I do think that it's coming down. It's not coming just straight across, but it's not like you know, 15 feet above her and just a small little window. I think this is something that's a large window that is to her side, but not just simply touching the floor. I think it is a little bit raised up. So to my knowledge, Draw.io lets you rotate things in 15-degree increments. I think that this could even be less than 15 degrees in terms of how it's coming across. I think this is close enough for our purposes here. So this is basically what we're looking for as our main key light, motivated by a window on her left side. So how do we get this? Well, we would have to use a lamp, and I would say that we want something that's a relatively powerful lamp, depending exactly on your budget, that, you know, has a wide range. And I do want to put a Fresnel on it to help focus that light, make it a little bit harder, and try to influence that look on the fabric where we have these hard line shadows. And then we're going to affect the density of the shadows with fill light, but I do want these harder shadows like that. So we're going to just, focus that light through this window and have it fall on her. We do have the area right in front of the throne. We do have the area right behind the throne as well. Notice how none of it is falling on the back wall right now. But if we did just this, then we would have her caught in basically a spotlight. We're not having any of that fill. We need that fill. And so the cheapest way to do it would probably be just bounce. So I guess we'll get to that in a minute. But I'm going to say, let's take some space lights and put a space light, you know, off to the side. I mean, we can basically motivate it as, you know, reflected light in the room, ambient light in the room. I think we could take a space light and put it right here-ish and have that fill in some of that area of the room. We could probably have one right in front, you know, and these are above. These are outside the camera, obviously. So yes, it's in front of the camera on the diagram, but it's being hung above. Something like this would get us a little bit more of the filling light on the face and the front area, while this one would be filling in for the actual like fully shadowed side. We do want to be able to see some of this wall over here, but like I said before, our back area is not being really illuminated almost at all. And you might be able to, depending on the size of your space light, get away with one. If this is a studio that has a whole array of space lights, even better. But this is kind of how I would place it if you only had 2 space lights, and if we only had one, I would just use the one right here. And this should create a bunch of kind of ambient light all around. And I will say that we're going to try to use a fog machine with this, because we want that streaky light from the Fresnel. There's more that goes into placing a fog machine than just putting it in the image, but I'm just going to put it there in the corner so that we know that's what we're doing. And that fog will help also lower the contrast in a similar way to fogging filters like a black pro mist or a smoke filter, those kinds of things, help lower the contrast in the image. This will help lower that contrast as well, opening up those shadows just a little bit and helping spread our light in a really volumetric way as well. So we're having this like non-directional space light being scattered by the fog. The Fresnel is coming through and with its sharper edges catching in the smoke here. And you probably would need to use something to waft the fog. If it was just static, I don't think you would get that impression nearly as well. With the Fresnel, you can also aim it a little bit to create that streak. If you wanted more streaks, you could use two Fresnels next to each other, and that would probably look fine because it would be being split by maybe a window frame or something like that. If you needed a little more control, you could put barn doors on your Fresnel also, which is something that I usually like to do. And for this case, I would say that this back wall right here should be black. If you don't have black, you could use Duvetine, and then we can just use our focus to blur it a little bit while keeping it really dark in the back there. Then when you have that fog, it will swirl around in this, and catch the light in the space, and it'll give some motion so that background won't just be completely blacked out and just a solid color. It'll have some movement to it with the fog, especially if maybe somebody walks up and greets her or speaks with her in front of her, those kinds of things. Or if she moves, shifts position, stands up, that will all make that fog swirl a little bit too, depending on your density of it. So I would say that you don't need a huge amount of fog. You just need enough to be catching the light. And if you're thinking about this is 1895. It's kind of a romantic scene about hundreds of years before. You're talking there's a big fireplace hearth that has smoke. You're talking there's candles, lamps of all types, maybe even torches, and those are all creating smoke in the room, and that's what's giving that impression that we're trying to replicate through fog. Like I said with my fog one the other day, don't use smoke to replace fog. Use professional actor safe fog. If you want the cheapest option for fog, that would be one of those Halloween fog machines that are pretty small, but they'll get you a long way. You can also get cloud in a can, and that's really effective. I like cloud in a can, but don't use things like smoke. I would also make sure that your actors don't have breathing issues like asthma, and those kinds of things, and check in with them, have conversations so that everybody is safe and protected, because fog is generally safe, but it's not great to continuously breathe for a really long time. Also, don't use like just humidifiers or something like that. You want to not have too much humidity all around all of your electronics and equipment and cameras and those kinds of things. So, if you're going to do fog, you probably should do it right. Definitely don't use smoke. And so, yeah, this kind of setup would allow us to get the light streaks right here. They're coming kind of, I was talking about that, how high the window is. They're coming at like just under 45 degrees. They're probably like 35 degrees. So it's not super high up on the wall. And it's a pretty large window in my opinion. And so we'll be able to capture those streaks, have these harder edges from the Fresnel helping us out with that. And that hard light, having the whole space be diffused just a little bit and having that light scattered through the fog, and then having these space lights to open up the shadow side and help wrap it around the front with non-directional light. If you needed a little more, you could certainly use things like a bounce on this side also to help push a little bit back in here. And this bounce could be a 5-in-1 reflector, it could be beadboard or pizza boxes. Pizza boxes might be a little small, but you could use anything. And then this also could just be a white wall. And if it's a white wall, then some of that light would be bouncing back as well. And that's, speaking of the shadows and light bouncing around, these space lights will help us open up these shadows on the floor in front of her and behind her, just enough to be able to see into them so that it isn't that completely spotlight look. We're not wanting a spotlight, we're wanting the key to accent and highlight her and highlight the shape of her fabric without it being too aggressively like a stage light. So if we have less budget, what are we going to do? Well, the first thing I would do is take away the lamp and space light from the front. The more important one is off to the left side, if we can do that. If you only have bounce, you could make it work. But we are really wanting to make sure that we're having some control of that light there, and a space light with a dimmable lamp is going to give you that flexibility and that control. If you don't have that, then you might want to move this towards the front just a little bit, so it's almost like at a, you know, diagonal angle to her. And then we're going to just add more bounce to the scene as well. And so we're capturing the light coming from the Fresnel and that space light and bouncing it back across her and this scene. In my opinion, that's pretty much the only way to remain close to this without sacrificing too much control while managing your budget. It's, you know, not that big of a difference because you're only getting rid of one lamp and one space light, and you're still adding bounce, but that's kind of what we can do with this. I'd say that fog machine is going to be doing a lot of work to help with the contrast and spreading the light around also. And because we want those light shafts, we really don't want to get rid of the fog machine unless our budget just absolutely does not allow for it. But then at that point, you're kind of looking at a different look than this. The cheapest option would be to just do it with bounced light. But at the same time, this lamp might not be powerful enough to, even with the Fresnel, to illuminate her and the scene and bounce enough light to actually open up these shadows. So I really probably would use a space light. If we straight up do not have a space light, you could use a lantern. People more frequently, in my opinion, have lanterns than they do have space lights. That's possible. What you could also do is take a lamp and actually shoot it onto, you know, bouncing material that you do have there, and have that be what is bringing more light back onto this side. You could do it that way, and that would certainly be cheaper because you don't have to have as much rigging for managing a space light and then the space light itself. And so while space lights are omnidirectional, I have put in some actual, like, you know, beam guides here to just kind of show what the goal is for how that light will cast. And so what we have here is 3 different ways. This is the cheapest way, where we're using a lamp to bounce light off of bounce cards or, you know, some other bounce material. This could be a 6x6, this could be a 5-in-1 reflector, and push that back on her to fill in these shadows right here and kind of wrap the light this way just a little bit. Right here, we have the second cheapest option, which is using the space light still, but with some bounce to reduce how much space light we actually need. And once again, lowering that contrast by having some light coming from that shadowed side, bouncing back. And this is our most expensive option, which is using the 2 space lights and some bounce to help make sure that we have a pretty smooth transition into that shadowed side. We have enough light to actually affect the whole shadowed area. And in all of these, we're using that fog machine to just make that light have more volume to it and to capture the swirls of it as it moves through the space when people walk, breathe, you know, move around, all that kind of stuff, which is being highlighted by the streaks created by our Fresnel key outside of the window. Thank you so much for going over this lighting diagram with me. Like I said at the beginning, if you want to get my Filmmaker Tools template, which is all of these things up here, that's available for free on my Patreon, patreon.com/TrentonHoshiko. And the direct link to that is in the video's description, completely free. You don't even have to sign up or anything. If you do find it useful, please do tell me in the comments. I love it when people leave comments. If you like this video, please give it a like down below. That really helps me reach new viewers who also like these kinds of lighting and cinematography breakdown, diagramming, discussion type videos. If you want to subscribe, I have plenty more videos about micro budget filmmaking, micro budget cinematography, and just, you know, lighting, equipment, tools and tips, all those kinds of things coming real soon. I'm really excited about some of the DIY projects I have coming up also. If you want to pick up the kinds of tools we've been talking about here for your own lighting kit, I have affiliate links down in the video's description. Those help support this channel at no additional cost to you. And if you do want to support my cinematography lesson videos and vote on upcoming topics, you can check out my Patreon at patreon.com/TrentonHoshiko. Man, I love talking about art. Thank you so much for watching. And this week, take care of yourselves, take care of people around you, take care of your community, reach out to somebody in need, be a good friend to somebody, whatever you can possibly do to make the world just a little bit better. And most of all, I hope you have a great week ahead of you.